Amid the smoke of a workshop on the brink of bankruptcy, an unknown boy makes an impossible promise before a millionaire's car and changes everything with just one sentence. The midday heat in Springfield transformed the asphalt of Lake Gardens into a hot plate that made the air dance in invisible waves. At Adams Motors Garage, the environment was even more suffocating than outside. The black BMW X6 occupied the center of the warehouse like a sleeping beast, its exposed engine revealing complex metallic innards that defied any attempt at comprehension. Steve Adams wiped the sweat from his forehead with the back of his greasy hand, watching his three best mechanics take turns around the vehicle like doctors facing a terminal patient. For 2 weeks, that $600,000 car had arrived at the garage with an apparently simple problem: engine misfiring and loss of power. What should have been a routine repair had turned into the nightmare that could spell the end of 20 years of honest work. Damn it. "Carla, try the valve on the left side again," muttered Big Tony, the most experienced mechanic on the team, his trembling hands revealing accumulated frustration. Anthony Rock, known to everyone as Big Tony, had 53 years of profession under his belt and had never encountered an engine he couldn't tame. Until now, Carla Martinez wiped her hands on her blue overalls and bent down again under the hood. At 28, she was the only woman on the team and had earned her colleagues' respect through unquestionable competence and infinite patience. Her brown hair was tied in a tight bun, with some rebellious strands escaping and sticking to her sweaty face. "I've tried that valve 15 times. Big Tony, the problem isn't there," she replied, her voice carrying the fatigue of someone who had slept only 3 hours the night before. "It's as if the engine had a mind of its own and decided not to cooperate." Jack, the third mechanic, a thin 40-year-old man who spoke little but understood much, shook his head negatively while observing the electronic injection system. "I've never seen anything like it. Every time we think we've found the defect, it moves to another place." Steve felt the weight of worries pressing on his shoulders like too heavy a burden to carry. The garage had been inherited from his father, who built it brick by brick during the 60s. The yellowed walls held decades of stories of repaired cars and satisfied customers. Now those same walls seemed to close in on him like the jaws of a vice. The phone rang in the small office at the back of the garage. Steve knew, even before answering, that it would be the customer. Richard Mendoza, a real estate businessman, a man accustomed to getting everything he wanted when he desired it. His voice always carried a tone of authority that made anyone feel small. "Hello, Steve? I'm calling for the 10th time this week. Is my car ready or not?" The cutting voice crossed the phone like a razor. "Mr. Richard, we're working day and night, but this model has some peculiarities that—" Steve tried to explain but was abruptly interrupted. "I don't care about the peculiarities. I pay well and I want my car working. If you can't fix it, I'll find someone who can. And I guarantee I won't pay a cent for the poorly done job." The line went dead. Steve held the phone for a few seconds before hanging up, feeling the world collapse on his head. $5,000 for the repair, money that was already committed to suppliers and employees. If he lost that payment, he wouldn't be able to honor the month's commitments. "How was the conversation?" asked Carla, who had heard the raised tone of the call. "Terrible. He threatened not to pay and even sue the garage for incompetence," Steve replied, massaging his temples where a persistent headache had been hammering for days. Big Tony snorted and kicked an empty oil can that flew far, making noise against the wall of tools. 30 years working on engines, and this damn German one makes me look like an amateur. There must be some factory defect they don't tell anyone about. Or someone messed with this car before it got here," muttered Jack, always suspicious. "I've seen a lot of poorly done repairs that turn into bigger problems later." The atmosphere in the garage was as charged as the air before a storm. Each frustrated attempt increased the tension among the mechanics. Steve walked back and forth, mentally calculating how much time he had left before the situation became unsustainable. Carla looked at the clock on the dusty wall. 2 in the afternoon, and they had been there since 6 in the morning with no break for lunch. Her stomach was growling, but the idea of leaving that engine without a solution bothered her more than hunger. There was something personal about this challenge, as if the car was testing not just her technical skills, but her ability to persist in the face of the impossible. "Let's try the ignition system one more time," she suggested, picking up the right-size screwdriver. "We tried that yesterday," Big Tony grumbled, but positioned himself to help. "Then we'll try again, and again until it works," Carla replied with determination that impressed even Steve. The three mechanics leaned over the engine again, their hands working in sync despite the frustration. The metallic sound of tools echoed throughout the warehouse, mixing with the buzz of fans that struggled uselessly against the scorching heat. Outside, the typical movement of the neighborhood continued its normal rhythm. Children played in the street, women hung clothes in the yards, men returned from work by bicycle. Life followed its natural course while inside Adams Motors' garage, 4 people fought against a mechanical enigma that seemed to have a life of its own. Steve looked out the window and saw some clouds forming on the horizon. Perhaps it would rain late in the afternoon, bringing temporary relief from the unbearable heat. But no rain would be able to wash away the anguish that grew in his chest with each minute that passed without a solution. The fate of the garage, built with so much love by his father and maintained with so much effort by himself, now depended on a stubborn German engine that seemed determined to resist any repair attempt. And time was running out quickly, like sand slipping through the fingers of a desperate man. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Tell us what city you're watching us from. We'll continue. It was at the exact moment when Big Tony raised his arms to the sky and let out a series of curses that would make a sailor blush that a small shadow appeared at the door of the garage. The contrast between the veteran mechanic's fury and the silent figure that materialized in the doorway was so striking that Carla stopped mid-movement, still holding a fuel hose. Jake Sanders was about 12 years old, although his frail stature and maturity in his gaze made it difficult to calculate his age precisely. His bare feet contrasted with the confidence of his firm steps on the oily cement floor of the garage. His tan skin was marked by the relentless sun of Springfield streets, and his black, disheveled hair seemed not to have known a comb for weeks. He wore a faded t-shirt, too large for his skinny body, and jean shorts with patches that told silent stories of a life that wasn't easy. Around his neck, a simple cord held a small screwdriver as a pendant, the metal discreetly shining against his skin. No one paid initial attention to his presence. Steve was on the phone with a supplier, trying to negotiate another week's deadline for payment. Big Tony continued cursing at the German engine, violently gesturing with a wrench. Jack was studying a technical manual, as if it were a lost treasure map. Only Carla noticed the boy standing at the entrance, observing the scene with attentive eyes that seemed to capture every detail of the mechanical confusion. There was something peculiar in the way he looked at the BMW, as if he was reading a story that others couldn't see. "Hey, kid," Carla called, wiping her hands on her overalls. "Are you looking for someone?" Jake shook his head negatively, but didn't move from the door. His eyes remained fixed on the exposed engine, following each movement of the mechanics with a concentration that impressed. "Then what do you want here?" "This is no place for children," grumbled Big Tony, finally noticing the boy's presence. His irritation with the engine automatically extended to the small intruder. "Just want to watch," Jake replied with a calm and direct voice that didn't match his young appearance. Steve finished his call and approached the group. He looked at the boy with a mixture of curiosity and impatience. He had more urgent problems to solve than dealing with curious children. "Listen, kid, this is a garage, not an amusement park. There are dangerous tools and—" "The problem is in the fuel pump," interrupted Jake, his voice cutting through the air like a sharp blade. The silence that followed was deafening. The 4 adults looked at each other as if they had just heard a cat speak. Big Tony was the first to react, letting out a harsh laugh. "Oh, is it? And how do you know that, know-it-all kid? Did you learn at the University of the Street Corner?" Jake showed no irritation at the sarcasm. He slowly approached the BMW, his eyes scanning the engine with the precision of a scanner. "The noise isn't coming from where you think. It's deeper, more profound. It comes from below." Carla frowned. During the 2 weeks working on that engine, she had developed an intimate familiarity with every sound it produced, and the boy was right about the noise. There was indeed something different in the frequency, something she had felt but couldn't identify. "Listen here, kid," Big Tony advanced toward Jake, his chest swollen with indignation. "I've been—" Working with engines since before you were born. I won't take a lesson from a— Let him speak, Carla interrupted, putting her hand on Big Tony's arm to restrain him. There was something in the boy's gaze that aroused her professional curiosity. Jake pointed to a specific area of the engine. I take engines apart and put them back together. If you remove the cover there, you'll see that the fuel pump has compromised sealing. It's not a visible defect, but it's causing intermittent pressure loss. Steve felt a shiver run down his spine. The confidence in the boy's voice was disconcerting. It wasn't juvenile arrogance or an attempt to impress. It was the quiet certainty of someone who knew exactly what they were talking about. "How can you be so sure about this?" asked Steve, approaching. "Because I've seen it before. My dad, he worked a lot with cars." The mention of his father brought a momentary shadow to Jake's eyes, but he quickly refocused on the engine. He took a flashlight from a nearby workbench and pointed to the spot he had indicated. "If you look here carefully, you'll see an almost invisible fuel stain. It's not a big leak, but it's enough to cause instability in the system." Jack, who had remained silent throughout the conversation, approached with a magnifying glass. He focused the flashlight's light on the point indicated by Jake and carefully examined the area. After a few minutes of silent observation, he straightened up with an expression of amazement. "He's right. There's a microscopic stain here. How the hell did you manage to see this?" Jake shrugged, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Just pay attention to what the engine is saying." Big Tony approached reluctantly and also examined the area. His expression of skepticism gradually transformed into one of incredulity. The stain was really there, so small that it would be invisible to anyone who didn't know exactly where to look. "This is impossible," he muttered. "How can a street kid see something that 3 professional mechanics couldn't find in 2 weeks?" "Maybe because you were looking in the wrong place," Jake replied simply. Carla felt a mixture of admiration and humility. There was something almost magical about the boy's ability to diagnose the problem with such precision. It was as if he possessed a sixth sense for engines. "Well," said Steve, still processing what he had just witnessed, "if you're right, can you help us fix it?" Jake nodded. "They'll need a small Phillips screwdriver and a number 2 flathead." Carla handed over the requested tools, watching, fascinated, as the boy moved around the engine with the dexterity of an experienced professional. His movements were economical and precise, without hesitation or unnecessary attempts. In 15 minutes, Jake had removed the cover, identified the exact problem in the fuel pump, and made the necessary repair. His small hands reached places that would be difficult for adults, and his technique was impeccable. "Done," he said, wiping his hands on a cloth. "You can start the engine now." Steve approached the steering wheel with his heart beating fast. He turned the key in the ignition, and the BMW's engine came to life with a perfect, smooth and powerful roar. The sound was completely different from the irregular noise that had tormented them for weeks. The silence in the garage was broken by the sound of applause. Carla started clapping, followed by Jack and reluctantly by Big Tony. Steve got out of the car with a huge smile on his face, the first genuine smile in a long time. "My God, kid, how did you learn to do this?" Jake instinctively touched the small screwdriver on his neck. "My dad taught me. He said that every engine has its own voice, and that whoever knows how to listen will always understand what's wrong." At that moment, without anyone noticing, a man outside the garage discreetly raised his cell phone and started filming. The following morning arrived with a surprise that no one at Adams Motors garage could have predicted. Steve arrived at work at 7 o'clock, as he had done for 20 years, but found a small crowd gathering in front of the gate. He initially thought it was some accident on the street, but soon realized that people were looking directly at his garage. "What's happening here?" he asked Mrs. Wilson, the lady who lived in the house next door and always knew all the news in the neighborhood. "You haven't seen? Your garage is famous on the internet. Everyone's talking about the boy who fixes engines," she replied, pointing to the cell phone in her hands. Steve frowned, confused. "What boy? What internet?" Then he remembered Jake and his extraordinary feat the day before. He borrowed Mrs. Wilson's phone and saw something that made his jaw drop, a video showing Jake working on the BMW had been posted online and already had more than 50,000 views. "I take engines apart and put them together," said Street Boy in Garage. and saved a $600,000 BMW, read the headline accompanying the video on an automotive news portal. Steve quickly opened the gate and entered the garage, where he found Carla already arranging the tools for another day of work. She looked at him with an expression of perplexity. "Steve, people have been calling since 6 in the morning wanting to talk to the engine boy. I don't know what they're talking about." "It's about Jake," explained Steve, showing the video on the phone. "Someone filmed yesterday and posted it online. Look how many people have seen this already." Carla watched the video with growing astonishment. The footage showed Jake diagnosing and repairing the engine with the precision of a specialist, while the adults watched incredulously. The image quality was good, and the audio perfectly captured the confidence in his voice when he explained the problem. "My God," she murmured, "this is going to change everything." As if her words were prophetic, the garage phone began ringing incessantly. Journalists wanting interviews, customers wanting to schedule appointments, curious people asking questions about the prodigy boy. Steve could barely answer one call before another came in. Jack arrived shortly after, perplexed by the crowd at the door. "What circus is this? There are people with cameras out there." "It's because of Jake," explained Carla. "We became famous overnight." Big Tony was the last to arrive and the least prepared for the situation. When he saw the cameras and reporters, his first reaction was one of deep irritation. He didn't like being the center of attention, and the idea that a street kid had overshadowed his decades of experience bothered him immensely. "Where's the kid?" he asked, looking around. "He hasn't arrived yet," replied Steve, "and when he does, he'll find all this." As if summoned, Jake appeared at the garage door at that moment. The small crowd's reaction was immediate. Camera flashes went off, reporters approached with extended microphones, and people began shouting questions simultaneously. The boy stopped in the midst of the tumult, clearly frightened by all that attention. His eyes searched for Carla, the only person there who had always treated him with genuine kindness. She quickly approached and guided him into the garage, closing the gate behind her. "What's going on?" asked Jake, his voice lower than usual. "Someone filmed you fixing the car yesterday and posted it online. You've become a celebrity," explained Carla, trying to maintain a reassuring tone. Jake instinctively touched the small screwdriver on his neck, a gesture that Carla had noticed he made when feeling insecure. "I don't want to be famous. I just like working on engines." Steve approached, still trying to process the whole situation. "Jake, people are offering money for you to fix cars." "A lot of money." "This could change our lives." "And mine?" asked Jake, a genuine concern in his young eyes. Before anyone could answer, the phone rang again. This time Steve decided to answer it personally. On the other end of the line, an excited voice identified herself as a producer of a morning television program. "Mr. Steve, we'd like to invite young Jake to participate in our program tomorrow morning. It's a unique opportunity to show his talent to all of America." Steve looked at Jake, who energetically shook his head in refusal. "Shayad needs to think about the invitation. Can I call you back?" After hanging up, Steve met with his team in a more reserved corner of the garage. "Folks, this could be the chance we've been waiting for. If Jake accepts some of these proposals, we can get out of the crisis for good." "And if he doesn't want to?" asked Carla, looking at the boy who was observing a disassembled engine as if it were the most interesting thing in the world. "Then we respect his decision," replied Jack, surprising everyone with his firmness. "The kid is not our employee." Big Tony snorted. "Employee? He doesn't even have a proper place to sleep. He should be grateful for the opportunity. Nobody asked for your opinion." "Big Tony," retorted Carla, irritated by her colleague's insensitivity. Throughout the morning, the garage received unexpected visits. First came a YouTube influencer, specializing in cars, followed by a reporter from an important automotive magazine. Then appeared a well-dressed businessman interested in doing business with Jake. The boy endured the first interviews with impressive patience, answering only what was necessary, and always turning his attention back to the engines. When asked about his technique, he simply said he had learned from his father. When they insisted on details about his personal life, he closed up completely. It was during one of these interviews that something unexpected happened. A customer brought in a car with an electrical system problem, that had left 3 specialized garages perplexed. While the reporter was asking questions, Jake politely excused himself and headed to the vehicle. In less than 10 minutes, he identified a microscopic short circuit in a wire that ran behind the panel. The repair was quick and precise. The customer left impressed, and the reporter had material for an even more sensational story. "How do you see problems that other professionals can't?" asked the journalist, clearly fascinated. Jake paused for a moment, as if organizing his thoughts. "My dad always said that each car has a soul. When you learn to listen to that soul, it tells you everything that's wrong." The response was filmed and would become one of the most shared quotes on social media in the following days. There was something poetic in the way the boy described his relationship with engines that touched people's hearts. At the end of the day, when the crowd finally dispersed, Steve counted the money they had earned just from the repairs Jake had made. It was more than they usually earned in an entire week. "Jake," he said, approaching the boy who was washing his hands in the sink at the back, "you saved our garage. How can I thank you?" The boy dried himself with an old towel and looked around the garage that had become his refuge. "Can I keep sleeping here in the back?" The simplicity of the request deeply touched Steve. While the whole world wanted something from Jake, all he wanted was a safe place to sleep and engines to fix. "Of course you can. This is your home now." Carla smiled when she heard these words. There was something special about that boy, something that went far beyond his extraordinary mechanical talent, and she was determined to protect him from the pressures that would certainly come with growing fame. That night, while Jake slept in his improvised corner at the back of the garage, the video continued to spread across the internet like wildfire in dry straw. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and perhaps some answers about the mysterious past of the engine boy. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Tell us what city you're watching us from. We'll continue. A week after the viral episode, the routine at Adams Motors Garage had completely transformed. The constant flow of new customers kept everyone busy, and Jake was proving more indispensable each day. His ability to diagnose complex problems in minutes had become legendary among luxury car owners in Springfield and the surrounding region. That Thursday morning, Carla arrived earlier than usual and found Jake already working on a Porsche that had arrived the day before. The boy was completely absorbed, his small hands navigating the engine with the precision of a surgeon. The concentration on his face was so intense that he didn't even notice her arrival. "Good morning." "Jake," she said softly so as not to startle him. He looked up and smiled, a genuine smile that appeared less and less frequently since fame had arrived. "Good morning, Carla. This Porsche has an interesting problem in the cooling system. I've never seen anything like it." Carla approached to observe his work. During that week, she had developed a genuine affection for the boy, a mixture of professional admiration and maternal instinct that surprised her. There was something vulnerable about Jake that contrasted with his extraordinary technical competence. "Jake," she said hesitantly, "can I ask you a personal question?" The boy paused in his work and looked at her attentively. "Sure, you never talk about your father. What was he like? Where did you live?" A shadow passed over Jake's eyes. He instinctively touched the small screwdriver on his neck, that gesture that Carla had learned to recognize as a sign of emotional discomfort. He was special. He knew everything about cars. Said he had raced once but never went into details. Jake replied, his voice carrying a melancholy that didn't match his age. "Disappeared 3 months ago. One day he was there, the next he had vanished." Carla felt a tightness in her chest. "Disappeared how?" "I don't know. I woke up and he wasn't in the abandoned house where we lived anymore. He left only this." Jake showed the screwdriver hanging from his neck. "And a letter saying I was strong enough to take care of myself." Before Carla could respond, Steve's voice interrupted them. "Carla, Jake! Come see this." They headed to the reception, where Steve was observing a well-dressed man standing outside the garage. The visitor wore an impeccable gray suit and dark glasses, despite the cloudy day. There was something in his posture that conveyed authority and purpose. "Who is that?" asked Carla. "I don't know, but he's been there for 10 minutes just watching. Seems to be waiting for something." Jake approached the window and went pale when he saw the man. His hands began to tremble slightly, something Carla immediately noticed. "Do you know that man, Jake?" No, he replied quickly, but his tone wasn't convincing. Never seen him before. The man finally decided to enter the garage. He removed his dark glasses, revealing penetrating blue eyes that seemed to analyze every detail of the environment. His grey hair was perfectly combed, and there was an air of sophistication in his movements. "Good morning," he said with a deep, educated voice. "My name is Edward Cavalier. I've come to speak with the young man who's causing such a stir on the internet." Steve stepped forward. "Do you want to schedule a repair? Our hours are quite full, but—" "This isn't about repairs," interrupted Cavalier, his eyes fixed on Jake. "It's about something much more important. May I have a private word with the young man? Anything you have to say can be said in front of all of us," Carla responded firmly, positioning herself between the man and Jake. Cavalier smiled, but it was a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Very well. Jake Sanders, correct?" "Sanders is an interesting surname. I knew a man with that surname many years ago. Robert Sanders. Are you related by any chance?" The impact of the name was immediate. Jake became even paler and unconsciously took a step back. The small screwdriver on his neck seemed to shine more intensely under the fluorescent light of the garage. "My dad's name was Robert," admitted Jake in an almost inaudible voice. "Ah, so you're Robert's son," said Cavalier, and his expression softened slightly. "That explains a lot. The talent for engines, the technical precision. It's genetic." "You knew my father?" asked Jake, his voice mixing hope and apprehension. "I knew him very well. Robert Sanders was one of the best race car drivers this country has ever seen, and also one of the best mechanics. We worked together about 15 years ago." Steve, Carla, and Jack exchanged looks, impressed. The story was getting more interesting by the minute. "Where did you work?" asked Carla, her distrust evident in her tone of voice. "In various racing teams. Robert was a specialist in high-performance engines. He had an almost supernatural ability to diagnose problems that others couldn't find," explained Cavalier, watching Jake carefully. "I see the talent has passed to his son. Where is he now?" asked Jake, hope shining in his eyes. Cavalier hesitated for a moment. "That's a complicated conversation, young man. Your father. Let's say he had some problems with influential people in the automotive world. He needed to step away for a while." "What kind of problems?" insisted Carla, her distrust growing. "Robert discovered some irregularities in important races. Manipulation of results, bribery of referees. When he tried to report it, he became a target," Cavalier sighed. "He was forced to disappear to protect himself and his son." Jake absorbed this information with impressive maturity. "So he didn't abandon me?" "Never. Robert loves you more than his own life. Everything he did was to protect you." Carla wasn't convinced. There was something in Cavalier's story that didn't fit perfectly. "Why are you telling this now? And how did you find us?" "I saw the videos on the internet. When I recognized the surname and the skills, I immediately knew he was Robert's son," explained Cavalier. "I came here because I have a proposal." "What kind of proposal?" asked Steve, his business instinct awakening. "I have contacts in the automotive world. I can get opportunities for Jake that go far beyond fixing cars in a neighborhood garage. Formula One teams, international racing teams, places where his talent would be truly valued." Jake looked at Carla, then at Steve, clearly divided. The offer was tempting, but he had found a family at Adams Motors garage. "I like being here," he said finally. "Of course you do. But think about your potential, Jake. Your father dreamed of seeing you in the big races. I can make that dream come true." Carla stepped forward. "Jake is just a child. He can't make that kind of decision alone." "With due respect, ma'am, but who are you to decide for the young man?" retorted Cavalier, a tone of irritation arising in his voice. "I'm the person who takes care of him," Carla replied firmly. Cavalier studied the group for a moment, then took a card from his pocket. "I'll leave my information. Think about the proposal, but don't take too long. Opportunities like this don't come every day." He headed for the door but stopped and turned to Jake. "Oh, and young man, that key you wear around your neck, your father told me about it. He said that one day you would know what it's for." With these enigmatic words, Cavalier left the garage, leaving behind a silence charged with tension and mystery. Jake stood staring at the door through which the man had left, his mind clearly working to process all the information. The small screwdriver on his neck seemed to have gained a new meaning, transforming from a simple memento into a possible clue to unravel the secrets of his past. That night, Carla couldn't sleep. Cavalier's words echoed in her mind like an unregulated engine. There was something in the well-dressed man's story that didn't fit, details that sounded too false to be true. Her experience as the only woman in a predominantly male environment had taught her to be suspicious of easy promises and men with too ready answers. The following morning, she arrived at the garage determined to discover the truth about Jake's past. She found the boy already working, as always, but noticed he was quieter than usual. Cavalier's visit had clearly affected him more than he showed. "Jake," she said, approaching carefully, "may I see that key you wear around your neck?" The boy hesitated for a moment, then took off the cord and handed it to her. The small screwdriver was older than Carla had initially realized. The metal was worn from use and time, but there was something engraved on the side that she hadn't noticed before. "There's something written here," she murmured, holding the key against the light. "It looks like a number. 1987. That's the year my father was born," explained Jake. "He always said this key was special, that it had belonged to his grandfather." Carla examined the key in more detail. There was something familiar about it, as if she had seen it before. Suddenly, a distant memory emerged in her mind. "Jake, can you stay here with Jack for a few hours? I need to check something." "Where are you going?" "To investigate," she replied simply, returning the key and taking the keys to her car. Carla drove to the Springfield Municipal Library, an old building downtown that kept decades of local newspapers in its archives. If Robert Sanders had really been a famous driver, there should be records of his career. After 2 hours of searching through old newspapers, she found what she was looking for. An article from 1995 showed a photo of a young driver holding a trophy. The caption read, "Robert Sanders, 28, wins the Midwestern Racing Championship for the 3rd consecutive time." The man in the photo had the same intense eyes as Jake and the same concentrated expression. But it was the next article that intrigued her. Dated 1998, the title was alarming. "Driver Robert Sanders disappears after denouncing irregularities in races." The text explained that Robert had presented evidence of result manipulation and bribery of referees. But before the investigations could proceed, he had simply disappeared. So Cavalier was telling the truth about that, Carla murmured to herself. She continued researching and found one more article. This one from 2000. Ex-driver's garage mysteriously burned down. The text reported that Robert Sanders' mechanic shop had been completely destroyed by a fire of unknown cause. Fortunately, there was no one on the premises at the time of the incident. Carla felt a chill. The story was becoming darker than she had imagined. She copied the articles and decided to return to the garage. But before that, she made an important stop. At the city records office, with the help of a friendly employee, she gained access to old documents related to Robert Sanders' garage. She discovered that the address of the original garage was just 10 blocks from Adams Motors' garage. Even more intriguing, the property had been sold right after the fire to a company named Cavalier Investments. This can't be a coincidence, she thought, a growing suspicion forming in her mind. She returned to the garage late in the afternoon, finding Jake finishing the repair of a Mercedes. Steve was in the office, calculating the day's earnings with a satisfied smile on his face. Business had never been so good. "Carla, where have you been?" "We had 6 cars today, all wanting specifically for Jake to take a look," said Steve excitedly. "We need to talk." "All of us," she replied, showing the copies of the newspapers she had brought. They gathered in the small office at the back. Carla spread the articles on the table and told everything she had discovered. The silence that followed was heavy. "So my father really was a famous driver," said Jake, touching one of the newspaper photos with reverence. "Yes, he was. And from what it seems, he was a brave person who tried to do the right thing," confirmed Carla. "But there's something else. Jake, the property where your father's garage was located was bought by Cavalier's company." Jack, who had remained silent throughout the conversation, finally spoke. "That means the man who came here yesterday might have been involved in what happened to the boy's father." "That's exactly what I think," said Carla. "And that makes me suspicious of his true intentions." Steve frowned. "But if he wanted to harm Jake, why would he offer opportunities in Formula One?" Maybe to get him away from here. To take him where he could control him better, suggested Carla. Jake had been quiet during the discussion, absorbing all the information. Finally he spoke. I don't want to leave here. You guys are my family now. Carla felt her heart warm with those words, but she knew the situation was more complicated than it seemed. Jake, there's one thing I need to ask you. That key you wear, did your father never say specifically what it was for? He just said that one day I would know. That when the right time came it would lead me to him. What if the time has come? Asked Jack. What if that key is really important? Carla had a sudden idea. Steve, is there any old cabinet here in the garage? Something that might have belonged to the former owner. There is. In the back, there's an iron cabinet that was already here when I bought the garage from Mr. Mitchell. I've never been able to open it. The lock has been jammed for years. The four headed to the back of the garage where a green metal cabinet, already peeling from time, occupied a forgotten corner. Jake approached with the key in hand, his heart beating fast. Could it be? He murmured, inserting the small screwdriver into the old lock. To everyone's surprise, the key fit perfectly. With a soft click, the lock opened after years of resistance. Inside the cabinet, they found yellowed documents, old photos, and something that made Jake hold his breath, a letter with his name written in his father's familiar handwriting. My dear Jake, the letter read, if you're reading this, it means you've managed to find this place and that my key has reached your hands. It wasn't an accident that Steve's garage was so close to my old garage. I planned everything so that you would find me here someday. The letter continued. I'm in hiding, but not far away. When you're ready, when you've found a family that protects you and loves you, I'll return. Cavalier is a dangerous man, son. He was responsible for the destruction of my garage and for the threats that forced me to disappear. Don't trust him, even if he offers everything you've ever dreamed of. Jake's hands trembled as he read the final words. You have a special gift, my son. Use it to help people as you're doing now. And remember, I never abandoned you. I've always been watching, waiting for the right time to come back. That time is approaching. I love you, Dad. At the end of the letter, there was an address and a simple instruction. When you're ready to meet me, go to this place, but only if you're sure that you're safe and protected. The silence in the cabinet room was total. Everyone processed the impact of that extraordinary revelation. He's alive, Jake murmured, tears of joy running down his face. My dad is alive and wants to see me. Carla hugged him instinctively, feeling a mixture of happiness and concern. The discovery was wonderful, but she knew it also meant that difficult days were ahead. Cavalier would certainly return, and when he discovered that his plans had been exposed, he could become much more dangerous than he already was. The week that followed the discovery of the letter was an emotional roller coaster for everyone at Adams Motors garage. Jake carried the paper with him like a treasure, rereading his father's words whenever he had a free moment. Carla, Steve, and Jack took turns protecting him, all knowing that Cavalier would probably return soon. It was on a Friday morning, when a light rain began to fall over Springfield, that fate finally knocked at the garage door. But it wasn't Cavalier who appeared first. It was a man of medium height, graying hair, and eyes that Jake recognized immediately, even after 3 long months of separation. Robert Sanders stood at the entrance to the garage, wearing simple but clean clothes, holding a bunch of yellow flowers, the favorite flowers of Jake's late mother. His eyes were fixed on his son, who had completely stopped breathing upon seeing him. Dad? Jake's voice came out as a broken whisper. Hi, son, replied Robert, his own voice laden with contained emotion. What happened next was one of the most touching moments that Adams Motors garage had ever witnessed. Jake ran toward his father as if the last 3 months had been just a terrible nightmare. Robert enveloped him in his arms, and father and son embraced with an intensity that made Carla discreetly wipe a tear from her eyes. I knew you would come, Jake murmured against his father's chest. The letter. I found the letter. You were very brave, son. Much braver than I ever was, replied Robert, kissing the top of the boy's head. Steve, Carla, and... Jack observed the scene with emotional smiles, but it was Carla who broke the moment when she noticed a familiar figure approaching the garage. Cavalier was standing outside, talking on the phone with a somber expression on his face. Robert, she said urgently, Cavalier is here. Robert looked up and saw the man who had turned his life into hell. His expression hardened, but he showed no fear. It was expected. He has informants all over the city. He knew I would appear sooner or later. Cavalier hung up the phone and entered the garage with determined steps. When he saw Robert, a cold smile formed on his lips. Robert Sanders. "The ghost driver finally decides to appear," he said, completely ignoring the others present. "Edward," Robert replied with a calm but firm voice. "Still trying to control other people's lives, I see." "Control?" "I offer opportunities. Your son has extraordinary talent. I can take him to places you could never manage." "My son has already found his place," replied Robert, placing a protective hand on Jake's shoulder. Cavalier laughed, but it was a sound without humor. "In a neighborhood garage? Robert, you've always been too idealistic. The boy could be rich, famous, work with the best teams in the world." "And be under your control as you tried to do with me 15 years ago," Robert said, his voice gaining strength. "You thought I had forgotten. The threats, the fire at my garage, the blackmail to keep me quiet about the irregularities I discovered." Steve, Carla, and Jack exchanged glances, finally understanding the full extent of the story. Cavalier had been responsible for separating father and son, and now he wanted to use Jake's talent for his own interests. "That's water under the bridge," said Cavalier, trying to maintain control of the situation. "I'm offering a bright future for your son." "A future that you can destroy at any moment, exactly as you did with me," Robert retorted. "Jake stays here, where he has a real family that cares about him." It was when Jake, who had remained quiet during the entire discussion, finally spoke up. "Mr. Cavalier, I appreciate your offer, but my father is right. I've already found my family here." The boy looked at Carla, Steve, and Jack with genuine affection. "These people took me in when I had nothing. They treated me with respect and kindness. They taught me that talent is only worth something when it's used to help others." Carla felt her heart warm with these words. During those weeks, she had developed a maternal love for Jake that she didn't even know existed in her heart. Cavalier realized he had lost. His expression hardened, but he was too intelligent to insist on a lost cause. "Very well, but don't come looking for me when you realize you've wasted the greatest automotive talent of the generation." "Don't worry," said Robert firmly. "We won't look for you for anything." Cavalier left the garage without looking back, and everyone could breathe a sigh of relief. The threat that had hung over their lives had finally moved away. "And now?" asked Steve. "Are you staying, Robert?" Robert looked around the garage that had become his son's home. He saw the organized tools, the cars being carefully repaired, and mainly he saw the genuine love in the eyes of the people who had protected Jake in his absence. "If you'll accept me, I'd very much like to work here," he said. "I can help with the more complex repairs, and mainly I can continue teaching my son." "Of course we accept you," exclaimed Steve. "Having two Sanders on the team will make Adams Motors the best garage in Springfield." In the months that followed, the garage really became a reference. Father and son worked side by side, their skills complementing each other perfectly. Robert brought deep theoretical knowledge and racing experience, while Jake contributed his extraordinary intuition and almost magical diagnostic ability. Carla developed a special relationship with both, becoming like an older sister to Jake and a great friend to Robert. Jack, always reserved, found in the Sanders masters who made him rediscover his passion for mechanics. Jake's fame continued to grow, but now in a controlled and healthy way. He began giving talks at technical schools, inspiring young people to pursue careers in the automotive field. His simple philosophy, "Listen to what the engine is saying," became known among mechanics across the country. Robert, in turn, finally found peace. He no longer needed to hide, no longer needed to fear for his son. The family they had found at Adams Motors Garage was more valuable than any trophy he had won on the tracks. On an especially quiet afternoon, while father and son worked together on the engine of an old Beetle, Jake asked a question he had kept for months. "Dad, do you regret reporting the irregularities? Losing your career?" Robert stopped what he was doing and looked deeply into his son's eyes. "Never, Jake. Doing the right thing is always worth it, even when it costs dearly. And besides, I lost a career, but I gained something much more important." "What?" "The certainty that my son grew up to be a man of character, and a new family that truly loves us." Jake smiled and went back to work, the small screwdriver that now hung from his father's neck shining under the garage light. That key had been the link that brought them together. But the love and determination of good people had been what really brought them back to each other. Adams Motors Garage continued to prosper, not just as a business, but as an example that the best families are those we choose, and that true success is measured by the happiness we manage to create around us. And when people asked Jake what was the secret of his